Six, seven. Missing 3 people. Okay, where are we? This is the November 19th. No class next week. Bummer. Okay, so we did part of chapter 15 last week. Didn't finish that, so we finished that today. And supposed to do 19 and 20. Probably won't get through all of that, but we'll get as far as we can. And then we have just one more class after this, right? Next, in 2 weeks, and then the week after that is just an exam. Final comprehensive exam, lecture exam in here. It looks like you have one for lab also that week on Tuesday. And I don't remember if I said this before, but I'm going to have a study guide for that exam. I haven't made it yet, or I started working on it yesterday, but I'll be working on that over the next few days and get that on Moodle so you can start preparing for that final exam. So the study guide will, I'm just going to go through the exam, and I'll just, whatever is asked about in each question, I'll just add that to the study guide. So the study guide will just be a list of concepts that are asked about on the exam. So it'll narrow down what you need to study. You won't have to study anything that's not on the exam. Okay. So look for that on Moodle. I'll probably send out an email, send out an announcement when it's posted on Moodle, so you can start using that study guide. Okay. What else? So you watched animal videos in lab this week? Were they called Shape of Life? Is that what they were? Oh, those are great. I love those videos. Okay, well, it's chapter 19 or 15. We need to finish 15 first. I gotta get the recording going. Okay, animals. So we talked about a lot of the general features of animals and some of the criteria or features of animals that are used to separate them into groups. Sexual versus asexual reproduction. Some animals have a type of metamorphosis, which means that the young immature form looks a lot different from the adults, and usually in many cases it will even have a different diet, eat a different kind of food. And the young, in the case of a complete metamorphosis, like many insects and also, and well, the immature form is called a larva. But in some, there are some kinds of metamorphosis called incomplete in some insects, in which the difference is not as drastic as a caterpillar versus a butterfly. It's just, it might just be that the immature insect does not have wings, but the adults do, or something like that. Types of asexual reproduction in animals, evolutionary tree. Different types of body symmetry, that means sameness. Symmetry means the sameness. So either no symmetry, which is called asymmetry, as in the sponges, no regular shape to them, to most sponges, but radial symmetry, it means like a wheel. So it's an imaginary axis through the animal, and it's the same in all directions out from that axis. And bilateral means there's a left and right mirror images. That's what most animals have. Germ layers are these embryonic tissue layers in the very early embryos, which will later become the many different types of tissues and organs. Body cavities, some animals have a body cavity, some don't. It's called a coelom. Protostome versus deuterostome. When the early embryo changes from just a hollow ball of cells to having a pouch into it, like this. If this end becomes the mouth, and this pouch continues on to the other end and forms a continuous channel. If this becomes the mouth and this becomes the anus, and this is called a protostome animal. If this becomes the anus and this becomes the mouth, it's called a deuterostome. That's another feature that's used to divide animals into taxonomic groups. Okay, then we just started going through surveying the animals, the animal groups, from the most primitive, simple ones, and just more or less progressing to the more advanced animals. So sponges are the simplest, most primitive animals. They don't even have special tissues. It's the one kind of animal that doesn't even have any sort of nervous system or muscle tissue. And the cnidarians are the ones that have the two body forms: Medusa, which is a jellyfish form, or the polyp, which is attached to a surface in the water, and then it's a stalk with tentacles at the top. And these, in either case, there's just one opening that serves as the mouth and the anus. Flatworms, nematodes, and arthropods. These are three different groups, but flatworms, talked about the flatworms. Many of these are parasitic, but the planarians like this are not parasitic. They're free living, just swim around in water. But these, the ones called flukes and the tapeworms, these are all flatworms that are parasitic. Nematodes are called roundworms. These are they live just about every habitat that animals can live. There are nematodes there. Lots and lots of different species. We don't even know how many there are. And the arthropods. This is probably the most successful group of animals on Earth because they've been around so long, and there are so many different species. There's millions of species of arthropods. Has an exoskeleton in the form of a shell, and so the muscles are attached to the inside of the exoskeleton instead of animals like us with a skeleton of bones with the muscles attached to the bones. So we were going through the arthropod groups. Didn't get all the way through this, but trilobites. These went extinct a long time ago in the Paleozoic era. That we only know them from fossils. There's none of them left. Chelicerates includes the arachnids and horseshoe crabs. The arachnids are the spiders and scorpions and ticks and mites. Those are all arachnids. Hexapods are the insects. Hexapod means 6 legs or 6 feet. 3 body segments, a head, thorax, and abdomen. The legs and wings are attached to the abdomen, or to the thorax. These myriapods are the centipedes and millipedes. So like a long stretched out insect with a lot of legs. The centipedes are predators. They even have venomous fangs. So they eat other insects and worms and spiders. But the millipedes they just eat plants and dead stuff. They're scavengers, perfectly harmless. Well, millipedes can emit hydrogen cyanide gas, which is toxic. It's for deterring predators. It's a defensive mechanism. Crayfish, these are the group of arthropods called crustaceans, which includes the lobsters, crayfish, shrimps, even the little isopods, or they're called roly-polies, the little bugs that roll up into a ball. If you lift up a rock outside, you see them all the time. Those are crustaceans. Some of those isopods live on land, but many of them live in water, live underwater their whole life, and have gills. Okay, these are chelicerates, arthropods, which are chelicerates, which are, the arthropods include these chelicerates, which include the arachnids. So a scorpion on the left and a spider on the right. Scorpions have a venomous sting at the tip of their tails. Spiders have venomous fangs. Okay, mollusks and annelids. The mollusks are the snails and clams and oysters, and also octopuses and squids and nautilus. Mostly in marine environments, so mostly in the ocean, but many snails and slugs live on land. And the different groups of these mollusks look very different from each other. So a snail doesn't look anything like an octopus. An octopus doesn't look anything like a clam, but they do have they do all share certain body parts in common, even though those body parts look different in the different groups. So these body features are something that's called a foot, and on a snail, that would be on the bottom of the animal. But the foot of a clam, in some clams, the foot will extend out through the shells, and they'll use it for digging or crawling, or getting food. The visceral mass is just where the internal organs are. The word viscera just means internal organs. So in a human, the viscera are the heart and the stomach and the intestines, just the internal organs. And the mantle, which is the part of the animal that produces the shell, if it has a shell. So if it's a clam or a snail that has a shell, the mantle is what produces the shell. And then most of them have something called a radula, which is like a scraping tool or a file, along with the mouth for scraping food off of rocks or something. So these groups are the gastropods, which are snails, slugs, and conches and sea hares. Conches look more like the conches are a lot of the attractive seashells that people collect. Those are actually conches, which are relatives of snails and slugs. Bivalves. Bivalves means two shells. So that's the clams and oysters, mussels, scallops. Two shells hinged together. They're filter feeders, so they have what's called a siphon, which just means they suck water in, and filter the particles of food out of the water, and then just eject the water back out. And they also take the oxygen out of that same water. So they have this water that's flowing through the animal is for filtering food and also getting oxygen for the gills inside the animal. And then the cephalopods. These are the octopus, squids, cuttlefish, nautilus. Some of them have a shell like the nautilus. On the octopus and squid, there's no shell. In fact, there's no hard parts to the animal except most octopuses have a beak, like the beak of a bird, at its mouth. The cephalopods, octopuses and squids, they're considered to be pretty intelligent. And there have been books written about the intelligence of octopuses. They do some amazing things. I read a story in one book about I think it was a professor at a university, a marine biologist, and he had a bunch of marine animals in his lab, and he had an octopus in an aquarium, and it was on a lab table in his lab, and at the other end of this table he had some other I forget what they were, some others smaller marine animals in jars with lids on them, and I think they were dead and in preservative or something. But this he came into his lab one morning, and in the night before, this octopus had crawled out of the aquarium and crawled across the table and unscrewed the lid on one of those jars because it had something that looked like food to it. And Probably when he found out that it was in preservative, he didn't eat it. It wasn't edible, but um, just amazing that an octopus could do something like that. Um, uh, so here's a snail showing the parts. So the visceral mass, that's just where the internal organs are. There's the mantle here that would secrete the shell. And then the foot is at the bottom. That's where it crawls, and that's what leaves the trail of slime that snails do. A slug is just a snail without a shell. And even if you look at a slug, you'll see that it has what looks like a mantle. It just looks like a pad on the top of the animal where the shell would be if it had one. But even though it doesn't produce a shell, it still has a mantle. There are a lot of slugs that are called sea slugs. They live in marine in the ocean, and many of them are bright colors and very beautiful, and they can swim. So it's just a snail and a slug. So you can see there's what looks like, if it had a shell, it would be here, and so that's a mantle, even though it doesn't have a shell. Okay, so these are all cephalopods. So a nautilus, cuttlefish, and this is a squid, and no, this is it's hard to tell what this is. Yeah, a cuttlefish, and this is an octopus. Many octopuses are capable of changing color like chameleons to blend in with their environment. Okay, the annelids, the segmented worms, called segmented because the body is well, there's no diagrams of this, but if you look closely to an earthworm or a leech, you can see that it looks like rings around the body. Those are the segments, and each segment has the same organs. So they're called segmented worms. This includes the earthworms, the leeches, and the polychaete worms. These are marine. They live in oceans. You live on the bottom of the ocean. Some of these they make chimneys out of the dirt or sand at the bottom of the ocean, and they live in these chimneys, and they just stick their heads out and filter food out of the water. Some of them move around, crawl around on the bottom of the ocean. So many of these are marine. Some are freshwater. They live in lakes and streams and ponds. And of course, moist terrestrial habitats like earthworms and night crawlers. Leeches, of course, are parasites. That would be what we would call an ectoparasite. Ectoparasites, they live on or attach themselves to the outside of their host. Endoparasites would be something like a tapeworm that lives inside of its host. Some leeches are not parasitic, and they're predators, and they eat insects and worms, but most of them are parasitic. Some leeches are very pretty. They have stripes and pretty colors. I've had some experiences with leeches. when I was in school, when I was in graduate school, I did a lot of field work, and I was with another friend of mine, another graduate student, and we we spent a lot of time wading through ponds and swamps and stuff, looking for um, various kinds of animals and plants. And one time we were wading through this swampy pond. The water was just about black, uh, and it got pretty deep in parts. It was like up to our waist, and we were in there for probably an hour, just wading around, looking for stuff. Um, and we had nets that we were trying to catch stuff, and we got out, and we were covered with leeches. Each of us probably had 100 leeches on our legs and private parts. And these were tiny leeches. They were none of them were even an inch long. They just looked like little dark red rubbery things, and you just brush them off. They come right off. But it was creepy. And we had no idea. You can't feel them. They're very stealthy. Okay. Okay, echinoderms and chordates. So these are the only groups that are deuterostomes, which means the anus forms first, and then the mouth. All the other groups of animals are protostomes. The mouth forms first, and then the anus in the early embryo. Okay, the echinoderms, that word means spiny skin. These are all marine. They live all in the oceans. There's none on land. None. You won't find any echinoderms in lakes or streams. So these are starfishes, sea cucumbers, sand dollars. They have the ability to regenerate body parts. So if one of the 5 arms of a starfish is cut off or bitten off by a predator or something, it can grow back. It's a type of radial symmetry. It's not true radial symmetry, but radial symmetry would be completely round. But these are starfish. It's not. It's more like this. So if you imagine an axis down through the center of a starfish, it's the same in 5 directions. True radial symmetry, it's the same in all directions out from that central axis. So this is called secondary radial symmetry, or it's called pentaradial symmetry. Penta means 5. They have a what's called a water vascular system. This is most well developed in the starfishes. It's just a system of tubes throughout the animal, and the tube feet are like little suction cups that are part of that water vascular system. Yeah, so the tube feet look like this. It's kind of like a squeeze bulb with a suction cup at the bottom. So this is how they attach themselves to a rock and crawl along. Or the suction on these tube feet is enough that a starfish can open a clam shell, pull it open, and to eat the clam inside. Okay, there are 5 classes or subgroups of the echinoderms. Asteroidea, sea stars or starfishes. Ophiuroidea are the brittle stars. These are like starfishes. They just have longer, more slender arms. Echinoidea, sea urchins and sand dollars. The sea urchins are the ones with the little needle-like things sticking out in all directions. Looks like a pin cushion with a bunch of pins sticking out. Crinoidea, sea lilies, and feather stars. These are attached to the bottom of the ocean and on a stalk, and they have feathery tentacles. And Holothuroidea are sea cucumbers. So here's some pictures. There's a regular sea star or starfish. There's a brittle star. It has longer arms than the starfishes. Here's a sea urchin. Looks like a pin cushion. Sea lilies. It's hard to tell what this is, but they're a bunch of stalks with little feathery tentacles sticking out for filter feeding particles of food out of the water. And this is a sea cucumber. The guy looks like a cucumber, but there's a bunch of different kinds of these that different colors and shapes. These have a defensive behavior. Sea cucumber, if it feels threatened by a predator that it thinks is going to eat it, it'll turn its internal organs inside out. So it'll like puke its stomach and intestines out and let the predator eat its organs. And then it'll grow a new set of stomach and intestines. Okay, finally the chordates. This is the most advanced group of animals. That it includes humans, but this is almost all of these are in the subphylum Vertebrata, which is the vertebrates, animals with backbones. So that includes lampreys. A lamprey is we got a picture of a lamprey. Well, it's not. A lamprey is a parasitic fish that has it doesn't have jaws. It has a round mouth with a ring of teeth that attaches to the outside of another fish, and it just hangs on and feeds on the body fluids of the fish. Sorry. But, so lampreys and the other groups of fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Those are all vertebrates. They all have backbones. There's only a few animals, a few species of chordates that are not vertebrates. Almost all of them are vertebrates. But all of them have 4 features at some point in their life. A dorsal hollow nerve cord. In the humans, that's what your spinal cord is, your dorsal hollow nerve cord. A notochord, so a deflexible rod of it's cartilage-like material that runs the whole length of the animal. And you don't have that, but when you were an embryo, you had that, a notochord. But it eventually, what's left of the notochord is the discs between your backbones. Pharyngeal slits. These are openings or grooves along the throat. Think of the slits in the side of a shark, where the gills are. Those are pharyngeal slits, but every kind of chordate had pharyngeal slits at some time during its life. in most cases, they're just like vestigial. They're left over, and they're only in the embryo. So even humans had these slits. We had slits in our neck, the side of our neck, when we were embryos, but they've disappeared, by the time we were born. And a postanal tail. Postanal means behind the anus. So even humans, when you were an embryo, you had a postanal tail, but it disappeared by the time you were born. So there's only two small groups of invertebrate chordates. So these are the only chordates, the only animals in this group that we call chordates that are not vertebrates. They don't have a backbone. And those are this group called Urochordata, which is the tunicates, or also called sea squirts. And they're called sea squirts because they live in shallow water on the ocean, in the ocean beaches or rocky coastlines of beaches, and it just looks like a little rubbery blob. And often if you find one and you go pick it up, it'll squirt you. And so they're called sea squirts. They'll squirt water out. And the other group is called the lanceolets, which is a small, like a little torpedo-shaped animal that spends most of its life just buried in the sand in shallow water, and it has little tentacles sticking out that filter feeds. So here's a diagram of a this is a larva, a tunicate, a sea squirt, showing how they just attach themselves to a rock or something in the shallow water, and it draws water in through this mouth, and then this is like a filter, a cage that the water comes through, and the water passes out through these holes, and the water comes out, but the food is food particles in the water are retained in there and digested by the animal. So because they have this ability to pump water through them, if you pick one up, they'll squirt. They'll squirt you right in the face. I don't know, just by accident, but they usually squirt water up, and it often gets you right in the face if you're picking one up. They have a larval stage that looks like this. That's free swimming. Same thing, it takes water in, filter feeds it, but it just looks different from it's just a different shape from the adult. But here you see it has all the features of a chordate. Has the dorsal hollow nerve cord, the notochord, this rod of cartilage-like rubbery material. It has a postanal tail, and these pharyngeal slits, which in this case are in this filtering device. But then in the adult, most of those features are gone. So in many chordates, those four features, or some of them, are only in the embryo stage or the larval stage, and they're not in the adult. So this is a lanceolet. This little thing, it's maybe 6 inches long, buried in the sand with its mouth sticking out, filtering particles out of the water to eat. Again, it has those four features that all chordates have. This is thought that the earliest chordates probably looked something like this. So the ancestors of all chordates, all vertebrates. Here again, a lanceolet. Okay, the vertebrates, all the other chordates. So the fishes, 30,000 species. So these were the earliest vertebrates, were primitive fishes. The jawless fishes evolved first. So fishes, the early fishes did not have jaws. Jaws came later. Uh, there are still some jawless fishes around, not very many. Most of them are extinct. The hagfishes and lampreys, and these are long, slender animals. So these are lampreys. Here they're parasitic, attached to the outside of this other fish. So they just hook on and hang on like that for a long time. Some fishes a host fish will have several of these attached. Used to be a lot of these in the Great Lakes, lampreys, but there are hardly any anymore. These hagfishes, these are weird looking fishes, and the scavengers, so they just live on the bottom of the ocean and eat dead stuff. But these, I've never seen a live one of these, but I've read something really weird that they do is they as a defense, they're capable of emitting slime. And like if you would take one of these hagfishes and put it in a bucket, before long that bucket would just be full of slime that they release as a defense when they're threatened. Okay, the jawed fishes with jaws that came later. Two main groups: the cartilaginous fishes called chondrichthyes. Chondra means cartilage. If you ever see chondra in a word, it has something to do with cartilage. And the osteichthyes are the bony fishes. Osteo means bone. So the cartilaginous fishes are fishes who have a skeleton of cartilage. They don't have bony skeletons. Their skeleton is cartilage. And that's the sharks and the skates and the stingrays. They have organs that can detect electrical currents in water. And there are very small electrical currents that they detect just from other fishes, other animals, because just from the nervous system of other animals, and nerve impulses are like a little electrical currents, and these sharks can detect that, and that's how they can detect other fishes around them, even in complete darkness. And they also have what's called a lateral line, which the bony fishes have also. Most fishes have this lateral line. In fact, if you look at the side of any fish, or most fishes, I don't know, now won't be able to find one where you can see it. About this one. Well, it's kind of clearly see this faint line along the side of the fish. That's called the lateral line, and it's actually a row of little pits in the body wall of the fish, and in each of those pits, here would be the body wall of the fish, and the lateral line is just a bunch of these little pits. And in each pit, there's a little structure, a little flexible structure that is very sensitive to pressure in the water. So any waves of pressure hitting the side of the fish, it will deflect that little structure in there, and the fish can feel that, and that is because of this lateral line. That this is how you ever watch a school of fishes, little school of minnows or something swimming together. They never bump into each other. They always, it's like they read each other's mind. They all turn left at the same time. is because they feel each other through that lateral line uh, uh, organ that they have. Okay, the bony fishes include most of the familiar fishes, so tuna, goldfish, catfish, bass, even seahorses are in that group. Most of them have scales covering their skin. Some bony fishes don't have scales, like the trout and salmon and catfishes. They don't have scales. They have a skeleton of bones. Most have are ray finned, which means if you look at the fins of bony fishes, like well, I can't see it there. Yeah. On this is a salmon. So these rays, these are like little tiny slender bones within the fins that make them stiff. That's called those are called ray fins. There's rays in them. Most fishes have what's called a swim bladder, which is just like a balloon inside of the fish that it can inflate or deflate to adjust its buoyancy. So if it wants to float higher in the water, it can inflate that swim bladder, and it uses carbon dioxide from its blood. It just takes carbon dioxide out of its blood and pumps up and puts that carbon dioxide gas into that swim bladder to pump it up. If they want to swim deeper, they'll deflate the swim bladder. Yeah. So these are cartilaginous fishes, a shark and a ray. This is a stingray. These have a spine sticking out of the tail, sticking up, that's venomous. But a stingray is pretty much like a shark that's been flattened out. But they both have they're predators. Sharks, of course, are pretty aggressive predators. Stingrays, they don't have the kind of mouth that a shark has. Stingrays, these rays, they have their teeth are their mouth is like their upper and lower jaws are like rollers with teeth on them. So they can crunch up crustaceans or crabs between those rollers. Okay, so these would be bony fishes. This is a salmon, sockeye salmon, and this one's called a coelacanth. This is called a lobe-finned fish, which is this is thought to be in between the bony fishes who have these ray fins. These actually have muscles and bones in their fins. So this was like in between. This was a fish evolving into a four-legged animal. So it's in between. And these were thought to be extinct. For many years they were thought to be extinct until one was caught in the Indian Ocean in, I think, 1938. Okay, now the rest of the vertebrates are called tetrapods. That means 4 legs or 4 feet. So the amphibians. So the amphibians, reptiles, even birds are considered tetrapod, even though they have 2 legs and 2 wings. But the amphibians are the most primitive or earliest tetrapods. And they're amphibians. Amphi means 2, and bi means life, so two lives. They have they can live either in water or on land. That's what that means. And most of them have a metamorphosis, so they start out life as a tadpole, and that's so for frogs and salamanders. Salamanders also are like tadpoles when they're young, and then later they grow legs. And in the case of frogs, the tail disappears. In salamanders, they keep the tail. They have gills as tadpoles, and most salamanders, they lose their gills as adults, but there are some salamanders that have gills as adults. Cutaneous respiration. So many of them breathe right through their skin, so they can just absorb oxygen right through their skin. Some of them don't even have lungs or gills. They do all of their breathing through their skin, and that's even for some salamanders that live on land are like this. They don't have lungs. They just have their skin has to be moist all the time to allow the oxygen to diffuse through it just from the air. So you find some of the salamanders, if you find them on the moist forest floors, they're usually under the leaf litter because they have to stay moist all the time, but they don't have lungs. They usually lay their eggs in water, so they reproduce in water, or at least in a moist place. So this includes frogs, toads, salamanders, newts, which are a type of salamander, and caecilians are legless. They're like legless amphibians. They look like worms. They don't have any legs, but they're amphibians. Amphibians are one of the groups of animals that are most threatened by environmental toxins and climate change. And there's a type of fungus that's wiping out whole populations of salamanders. So a lot of frogs and salamanders are going extinct. So we see the metamorphosis of a tadpole to a frog. Okay, reptiles and birds. Many biologists consider birds to be reptiles, so we call this one group. Birds are reptiles. But the reptiles and birds and mammals, which is the other group of vertebrates, have what's called an amniotic egg, which the amphibians do not have. Amphibians lay eggs. They have to lay their eggs in water because the eggs have to be wet. But with an amniotic egg, the egg can be laid on land. So reptiles and birds, can lay their eggs. Most of them lay their eggs on land. Because the egg has a shell, frog eggs just looks like a little. A frog egg is just looks like a little clear rubbery thing. Doesn't have a shell. But the egg of a snake or lizard or bird has a shell, and then just inside of that there's the shell. Inside of the shell there's a layer. There's the amniotic egg has a shell, and then inside of it has layers of tissue that prevent water loss, prevent it from drying out, and also that can absorb oxygen. Oxygen diffuses through the shell, and then um, uh, that oxygen can be delivered to the little embryo that's growing in there. And the amnion is a sac containing liquid um, that has the embryo in it. And so this allows the egg to be laid on land. It won't dry out. It can absorb oxygen right out of the air to be used by the little developing animal inside. The bird eggs are usually hard and brittle, but eggs of reptiles like snakes and lizards they have a leathery shell. Like the eggs of something like a snapping turtle. The eggs are pretty big. They're about 1 inch in diameter, and the shell's not hard. It's leathery. It's white like an eggshell, but it's soft and leathery. Okay, reptiles live on land completely. There are some reptiles that live in water, like sea snakes live in water, and a lot of snakes can swim and spend. There are water snakes. They like to be in water, but they're mostly land animals. They have scaly skin, scales on their skin. They're ectotherms. Amphibians, reptiles, and fishes, they're all ectotherms, which means we used to use the word cold-blooded for that, but it just means they don't generate their own body heat like we do. Birds and mammals have a constant body temperature, and we generate our own body temperature. These other animals, reptiles, amphibians, fishes, they don't do that. Their body temperature is just whatever temperature is the environment. And so if they have to stay warm, they have to find a source of heat somewhere, either burrow down underground where it's not as cold, or on a sunny day, reptiles will also often be out on a rock, just absorbing sunlight to warm up. Reptiles include crocodilians, which is the alligators, crocodiles, and caimans, and the lizards and snakes, and also the turtles. Here we see a crocodile, a chameleon, which is a lizard, which can change color to blend in with surroundings. Garter snake, which are perfectly harmless. They can I've been bitten by garter snakes, but it doesn't hurt. It just feels like sandpaper rubbing on your skin. And a tortoise or turtle. These are all reptiles. And birds. Believed to be descended from the group of dinosaurs and includes Tyrannosaurus rex. And some biologists say they're not only descended from dinosaurs, but they are dinosaurs. Birds are living dinosaurs. But dinosaurs were ectotherms. They were cold-blooded, but birds are warm-blooded, like us. So that's one difference. Birds have feathers, which dinosaurs didn't. Feathers are considered to have evolved from scales, just modified scales. And the legs and feet of a bird have scales, just like on the skin of a reptile. So the feathers are for insulation and also for flying, of course, for flight. They have lightweight, hollow bones, which is better for flying, of course. And they have a bird. The way birds breed is they have a more efficient respiratory system than mammals like us. That's more efficient at moving air through the bird. So here's a person or a mammal. Let's just a mammal. It breathes in air into the lungs, takes in air, and then blows it back out. In and out, in and out. And that works okay, but it's not perfectly efficient because when you exhale, you never get all of the air out of your lungs. So you inhale air, and the oxygen in that air goes into your blood, and then you exhale it. But some of that air that now doesn't have much oxygen in it, you don't completely exhale it. So you inhale more air with oxygen, and that mixes with the air that's in there from the last breath. So it's not terribly efficient compared to a bird. A bird it takes in air, breathes in air, and the air goes into an air sac, and then from there it goes into the lungs, and from there it goes into another air sac, and then from there it goes out. And so it has this. It's like the air is going in is flowing in through the lungs, and it continues on out. So instead of taking air in and blowing it back out, the air is passing through the lungs, and it's just more efficient because there's always fresh air coming into the lungs that's high in oxygen, and there's not oxygen, not air left in the lungs from the previous breath. And it's just a more continuous flow of air through the lungs. It gets more oxygen out of the air, and you may have noticed. Listen to a bird singing? It's like they never stop to take a breath. I think, how do they do that? It's because they have this different kind of respiratory system that allows them to do that. It's like the air just continuously flowing through and out, instead of in animals like us, take a breath in and blow it back out. And birds, because they're warm-blooded, they're very high-energy animals, and because to maintain that body temperature and for flying, and it uses a lot of energy. So it's good that they have a very efficient way of getting oxygen for other muscles. Feathers and hollow bones of birds. Okay, finally the mammals. That's what we are. Again, warm-blooded, endothermic, have a constant body temperature. Hair and mammary glands are also features of mammals. Mammary glands, that's why they were called mammals, because the females have mammary glands. Those are the milk-producing glands. Mammary glands are considered to be modified sweat glands through evolution. Only mammals have mammary glands. No other animals produce milk this way. Three groups of modern mammals: monotremes, marsupials, and eutherian mammals. And the mammals became the dominant large land animals after the dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. So before that, during the Mesozoic era, the age of the dinosaurs, the reptiles were the dominant large animals on Earth and in the oceans. There were a lot of large marine reptiles And there were mammals at the time of the dinosaurs, but they were pretty insignificant. They were small and probably spent most of their time hiding from dinosaurs that wanted to eat them. And only when the dinosaurs went extinct, mammals took over. They became the dominant large land animals. These three groups of modern mammals, the monotremes, marsupials, eutherians. Monotremes, this is a very small group. There's only 3 species, and these are egg-laying mammals. So the platypus and the echidna. Echidna looks like a little porcupine. And they're both native to Australia and New Guinea. So they are mammals. They have hair and mammary glands, but they lay eggs. And so, pictures. Yeah. So there's a drawing of platypus and echidnas. We sell these in pet shops now. Echidnas. Marsupials. These are the animals with a pouch. So kangaroos, koalas, even Tasmanian devils. There's only one opossum in North America, native to North America, or one marsupial, and that's the opossum. And opossums are throughout the 48 contiguous, the lower 48 states in North America. They're in California, they're in North Carolina, they're in Maine, pretty much everywhere. So they're pretty successful, but they have tiny brains. So you look at a skull of an opossum compared to the skull, the same size of a raccoon, of the same size. Like take a 15-pound raccoon and a 15-pound opossum, and look at the skulls of both of them. The skull, the brain case, where the raccoon is about 3 times the size of the brain case for the brain case is just where the brain is located. In a opossum, it's just tiny. It's about 1/3 the size of a raccoon. So they're not very bright, but they've survived. They're very successful species. Okay, the mammary glands are in the pouch. So these animals, they start out growing in a uterus in the mother, and then very early on, the baby crawls out, or is born. It leaves the uterus and crawls. And so it's outside of the mother, and then crawls up the mother's belly into the pouch, and then will grab onto a nipple and just hang onto that nipple, and nurses on the mother's milk and just stays in the pouch. In the case of opossums, they will usually have a litter of several babies at once. They'll all be in that pouch together. And there's a few times I've seen something really sad, which is a mother opossum run over by a car and the babies scattered around on the ground on the road. Even as one time I found them, the babies were alive, the mother was dead. It's really hard. I've tried keeping them alive. It's really hard to raise little tiny baby mouse-sized opossums. Hard to keep them alive. Some people would say, "Why would you do that anywhere? They're just like rats." But I like opossums. I think they're cool. Hate to see any animal die or suffer. And then the eutherians, that's the animals that in which the babies develop the whole time in a uterus. Um, they're called placental mammals because there's a placenta. The placenta is the part of the uterus where the umbilical cord is attached. So, here's this in a human. Here's the uterus. It's got muscles, thick muscles, the muscles that contract at childbirth. But the placenta would just be it's about the size of your hand. In a human, it's just a flat organ that only forms during pregnancy on the inside wall of the uterus, and it has the umbilical cord attached to it, and then that's attached to the baby. Marsupials have a placenta and a uterus also, but the baby only stays in there a short while, then crawls out and goes into a pouch. But in the eutherian mammals like us, you stay in there until you're born. Stay in there for the whole gestation, the whole 9 months. Okay, so these are the monotremes. And here's a marsupial, Tasmanian devil. And then these are all the placental mammals. So what's that? A lemur, a monkey, a gibbon, which is a primate, chimpanzee. But these are all primates. Yeah, primates, which are a group of mammals, including humans. Okay. But the other groups of mammals are there's a group called the carnivores, which is the cats and dogs, cat family, dog family, wolves, weasels, skunks, raccoons. Those are all carnivores. And then the rodents is a group. The defining feature of rodents is they all have the same kind of teeth. In fact, in the mammals, the main feature for putting them into the different groups is the kind of teeth that they have. Okay. Any questions about animals? About 95% of animal species are invertebrates. So the vertebrates, the ones that most people think of the more important animals, because they're larger, more conspicuous. So the fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, that's only a tiny percentage of the animals on Earth. That's just like 5%. All the invertebrates are really the ones that dominate the planet. And will probably be around longer. Most invertebrates probably go extinct, and there will be could go extinct, and a lot of invertebrates would still survive. Something I thought was kind of ironic when I was in school, and most universities, as it was where I went to school. I took courses in zoology, which is study of animals, and at the university where I went, they had a course in invertebrate zoology that was one semester, but the vertebrate zoology course was 2 semesters, even though 95% of animals are invertebrates. They spend twice as long on vertebrates than compared to invertebrates. Okay, I guess take a break and then look at the next chapter. And if I had the exam from last week, if you want to pick that up, you can. And the take-home exam, there's a stack here. So if you haven't turned it in, that's due today. Who's here today? Oops. So Odin's here. Haley's here. Kamoni. Jacob, not here. Right? Priya and Sharika is here. Ryland, right? Ryland. Cameron. Tyson. Gymnasia. Okay. Chapter 19. So these last three chapters are ecology and conservation biology. So chapter 19, population and community ecology. Remember, definition of population and community of population is all the organisms of the same species living in an area, or it could be the whole world, whatever area we focus on. And same with community, except it's all species. The community is all the organisms of all species living together in an area. Although sometimes we could narrow that down and refer to the plant community or the animal community or the bacterial community within an area. We just wanted to focus on one group of a species. Ecology is a branch of biology. It's the study of interactions between organisms and their environments, and the environment includes other organisms. So ecology includes how different species interact with each other. The term ecology has become associated a lot with stuff like pollution, preventing pollution and in the environment, but that's a tiny part of ecology. Ecology is really interactions between organisms and their environments. An ecosystem is all the organisms along with the non-living features of an environment. So the biotic and the abiotic. So the word biotic just means living stuff. Abiotic, the prefix a means without or not. So abiotic means non-living features of an environment. So the ecosystem is a community along with all the non-living stuff like the rocks and water and soil. Although soil includes living organisms. Okay, features of a population that can be different in different populations. So the population size, of course, how many individuals, population density, and which means how many individuals per area. So how closely packed they are together. And the distribution pattern, the spacing of individuals relative to each other within the population. And we'll look at different examples of distribution patterns in a minute. So the population size, just number of individuals. In studying ecology and the effects of different environmental factors on a population that could reduce a population or drive a population to extinction. Of course, the smaller the population, the more sensitive it is, or more vulnerable it is to extinction. If there's not very many to start with, then if we start shrinking the population, it's going to be more likely to go extinct. And also, another problem with small populations is that the smaller a population gets, usually the less genetic variation there is. So in a population of only 100 individuals, there's probably not as many different alleles as there would be in a population of 10,000. And so as we've learned, genetic variation is necessary for adaptation by natural selection. So this has been a problem in trying to save species that have been on the verge of extinction. If there's only 100 individuals left in the world, most of the alleles, most of the different genes that have existed when that population was larger, those alleles are gone. So now, even if we manage to save that species and get the population increasing again, those alleles are still gone. So even if we grow that population of 100, if we grow it back up to 1,000, there's still not very many alleles in that population. So genetic variation is gone. It'll take tens of thousands of years for new mutations to just happen by accident and get genetic variation back. Okay, example of population: the number of certain species of fish in a lake. Okay, population density: number of individuals per unit of area. So how many squirrels per acre? That would be the population density, or it could be per unit of volume. So we're used to think we live on land where we think in terms of area, acres or square feet or something. But if you're a fish and you live in water, you live in a three-dimensional medium. So if we were measuring population of fishes, it would make more sense to say how many fishes, not per square foot, but per cubic foot. So in all three dimensions, right? Of course, the density can affect interactions such as competition for food, ability of individuals to find a mate. So if you're a species of animal and there's only one of your species per square mile, when it's mating season, you might have a hard time finding a mate because they're spread out so much. If there's a lot of individuals, a high population density, you're all competing for the limited resources like food. You might go hungry if you can't outcompete all the others. Okay, here's just some information interesting about the relationship between the size of an individual animal and the population density. So typically, the larger an animal it is, the larger the animal, the lower the population density. So if you're a mouse, you probably have a lot of other mice around you, but if you're a bear, probably not so many. So mice, there might be hundreds per acre, but bears, there might be only one bear per 100 acres. Okay, distribution patterns, so the spacing of individuals relative to each other. There are three patterns that are usually recognized and given name. They've been given names. So random means there's no regular pattern. They're just scattered. It's unpredictable. So examples of this are plants whose seeds are just spread by wind. So example is like dandelions in people's yards. They just grow wherever the seeds happen to land. There's no rhyme or reason to it. They're not evenly spaced at all, just random. Clumped. Individuals tend to be clumped together. So there's patches of individuals, and then might be some big spaces with no individuals. That's called clumped distribution. And this would, there are some reasons for this. Could be that, for example, plants that drop their seeds straight to the ground. So the seeds aren't blown away by wind, so wherever the parent plant is, the seeds just fall off and they'll grow right there. So the plants of each generation tend to be where the parent plants were. So there's nothing to distribute them elsewhere. Could be a lot of animals have clump distribution because they're social. They live in groups or herds. And there could also be some kind of resource that the animal needs, that this type of animal needs, that's only in one place. So animals tend to not get too far from water. So if it's an animal that needs to drink water a few times a day, they're going to be close to a river or a lake or something. That would be a reason for clumped distribution. Some types of plants need more water than others, so they'll tend to be in low-lying areas where the water tends to collect, where the soil is more wet. So that would be a reason for that type of plant to be in one place and not other places. Uniform distribution. Uniform means the same, all the same. So evenly spaced. This could be because some plants, like there's a plant called a creosote bush that lives out in the deserts parts of the western U.S. and it looks like they've been planted because they're evenly spaced. And the reason for that is each plant produces a toxin into the soil. The roots produce a toxin that repels other plants. So they can't live any closer. They can't live. If there's one plant, like looking down on it, if there's one plant here, it'll put these toxins out into the soil all around it, and so no other plant will live there. Another plant will have to be at least that far away, and then it'll put toxins out, and so they end up being all evenly spaced, pretty much. So that's a type of uniform distribution, any animal that's territorial. Territorial animals tend to defend a certain distance around them. So, I know that chipmunks will have their burrow where they live. That'll be their home, but they won't tolerate any other individuals for about a half acre. So each chipmunk has to have a half acre to itself. If any other chipmunks come into that half acre, they'll chase them out. So that's another reason for this uniform distribution. They'll all be like 2 chipmunks per acre. these penguins, when they are uh, um, incubating their eggs, they will in the Antarctica. They're pretty evenly spaced out. They're pretty close together, but they can't get too close. They won't tolerate others getting too close to them. So they're pretty evenly spaced out, and they just stay there all through the incubation period of the eggs. So here we see random distribution. These dandelions in a field. Elephants, clump distribution, because they're social animals. They live in herds. And then these territorial penguins are uniform. This term demography or demographics is a study of populations. Births, deaths, diseases in populations, even stuff like political preferences, or that's all part of demographics. What religion people are in different populations. But demographics also refers to studying populations of animals and plants. And some of the tools that our ecologists use for demographics are life tables and survivorship curves. So these are just ways of analyzing information about births and deaths in a population. So a life table is a list of the life expectancy of members of the population at different ages throughout their life. And so here's a typical life table. So this is for a mountain sheep, kind of a Gaul sheep, D-A-L-L. And so the age intervals from 0 to half years, so from birth to 6 months old, and then 6 months to a year, 1 year to 2 years old. And then the data are listed in these columns. So this column is the number dying in this age interval out of 1,000 born. So on average, out of 1,000, if there's 1,000 individuals born in this population in a given year, how many of them will die within the first 6 months? How many of them will not make it to 6 months old? So in this case, 54 out of 1,000 won't make it to 6 months old. The number surviving at the beginning of the age interval out of 1,000 born. So, so of course, the first interval is going to be 1,000 because that just means how many are going to survive birth. But the rest of these are. So how many would still be surviving at the beginning of 6 months old, and so on. Mortality per 1,000 alive at the beginning of the interval. Mortality means death. So how many of them will die? And the life expectancy, or the mean lifetime remaining to those containing the age interval. So if you live to make it to a particular age interval, what's your life expectancy after that? And this is something that insurance companies do too. This sort of actuarial data. Especially life insurance companies, they just have tons of data like this about people. Whatever your lifestyle is, however you're old, they can tell you what's your probability of living another 10 years, or 2 years, or 5 years. because that's how they figure out how much to charge for life insurance policies, and how often they can expect to have to pay life insurance because somebody dies. But populations, the size of the populations and things that affect the size of populations is something that ecologists love to study. Okay, survivorship curve. This is a graph showing so the number of surviving population members versus the age of the members. So just look at, best way to explain it is to look at it. So the y-axis here is just the number of individuals surviving, and the x-axis is time. So how long a time this is just whatever is the total life expectancy for that type of animal. So if this was humans, then this amount of time would be like something like what's the life expectancy for humans now? 78 years or something. So the line here, there's three of them, three different examples here. So in humans, if you're a human, so if this is total life expectancy of 78 or 80 years or something, so this right in the middle, this would be about 40 years, 40 or 35, 40 years old. So we see this line has not gone down very much. It stays, it's almost level. So that just means that most people don't die young, at least in our country anyway. Most people don't die young. So you're born, your chances of dying in your first 10 years are pretty low. But as you get older, you get to be 40, 50, 60, then you see the line starting to dip. And then you get up to 60, 70, then it drops off sharply. So the older you get, the more likely it is you're going to die. And so this curve represents how many individuals or what percent of individuals are alive at any given age. All the individuals born right now, how many of them are still going to be alive 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20, 30, 40? The farther in the future it gets, the less of those people are going to be alive. So they're going to be dying off. So that's how it is in humans, because humans survive pretty well. Not many of us die young. Compared to other animals, if you're a bird, your chance of dying are pretty much the same throughout your life. You're just as likely to die 10 days after you're born or as 10 months after you're born. That's why this line is pretty straight, declining. But this kind of curve, though, represents organisms like a lot of plants are like this. That's why plants produce so many seeds, because most of them won't make it. Seeds fall on the ground somewhere. Many seeds don't even germinate. They don't even start growing at all. And then if they do start growing, chances are a deer is going to eat it before it even grows, or a ram is going to eat it before it even gets started. So it's not going to live very long. Fishes are like this. Fishes produce many, many eggs. Most of them don't make it. The eggs are eaten by other fishes, or else if they do hatch, then those little tiny baby fishes will be eaten by bigger fishes. And insects are like that. Most insects produce a lot of eggs. Most of those eggs, those insects won't survive very long. An insect might lay 200 eggs, maybe three of those eggs, three of those babies will survive to be adults, and then they'll reproduce. So a lot of death early on, but the longer you survive, if you make it through the first 25% of the life expectancy of that kind of organism, then you have a better chance of surviving longer. But so a lot of death early in life in this type of organism. And so these ecologists have given these given names to these three types of survivorship curves, called type 1. That's like humans, and most large mammals are like this. And this is because large mammals, they take good care of their babies. Like humans, we take care of our babies and keep them alive and protect them. So there's good survivorship. These animals, like birds, they take care of their young. They raise they're good parents. But it's hard. It's hard being a bird. It's sometimes hard to find food. There are predators trying to kill you and eat you. So they get killed a lot. But these are the ones that these type 3 organisms. Usually they produce a lot of offspring and they don't take care of them. Insects. Some insects take care of their babies, but most of them, they just lay eggs and then they leave. Same with fishes. Most fishes lay their eggs and then leave. So their strategy is just have a lot of babies. And most of them will die, but usually there will be a few of them that survive. Exponential growth and logistic growth. Exponential growth just means the rapidly accelerating population size. So this is how this is represented by a J-shaped curve like this one on the left. So if a population starts out very small, and if there's unlimited resources, plenty of food, plenty of water, plenty of places to live, not a lot of predators killing you, killing the individuals, then the population size will grow really fast. And that's because the larger the population gets, the more individuals there are reproducing. So if they start out with just 2 individuals, a male and a female, if they have four babies, now there's 4 of them, and now these 2 pair up and have babies, and there'll be 8. Same thing here, then they'll go 16, 32, and so the bigger the population gets, the more individuals there are reproducing, so the faster the number grows. That's called exponential growth, and it's represented by this J-shaped curve. So the larger the population gets, the faster its population size increases. But that can't go on forever, because eventually they're going to run out of food, water, other resources, and space, nesting sites. You need that. When the population gets more dense, there tends to be more diseases spreading from individual to individual, contagious diseases. So all those things will prevent the population getting much bigger. And when those limitations start keeping the population from increasing, the population size will start to level off. And so it'll be this S-shaped curve. And that's called logistic growth. So this can happen for a while until the population gets too big, and then but But this can't go on forever, so this is what happens in reality. There are all these some limitations preventing the population from just growing forever. And this population size, so the maximum population size that an environment can support indefinitely is called the carrying capacity. So, and that the carrying capacity just depends on how much resources there are for that particular species. Some environments could support more mice, could have a higher carrying capacity for mice than other environments, if there's more food and water. So let's look at something I pulled up here earlier. Look at this number. It's 7.8 billion something. That's a new person. Every time that number changes, that's a new person being added to the world population. Think that can go on forever like that? That's crazy, that many people. It's like several per second. More people added to the planet. What are we going to do with all these people? How are we going to be able to feed them? What are we going to do for water? All these people producing pollution, using fossil fuels. What's the carrying capacity for humans on Earth? How many people? How large can this population get that can be sustained indefinitely? Some people say we've already reached the carrying capacity, and we're just living on borrowed time. This can't last. Even if we stop growing the population right now. What that means. Okay, that was exciting. Okay, talking about carrying capacities. Nobody knows what's the carrying capacity for humans on Earth because it keeps, for one thing, it keeps changing. Um, uh, every time somebody figures out a better way to grow food, then the carrying capacity goes up a little bit. So, uh, uh, it's a moving, it's a changing thing, and but we're probably close to it, close to the carrying capacity for humans on Earth. This is showing just a couple of examples of populations that have actually been measured through time and show this kind of logistic growth. At some point, there will be something limiting the population size. Even growing yeast in a test tube, eventually they'll just run out of food, and they produce their own waste that makes the environment less favorable for more of them to grow. They just crowd each other out and use up nutrients and produce waste. Okay, some factors that affect population size are called density dependent, and others are called density independent. And that just means some factors that tend to limit a population size have more effect the larger, the more dense the population gets. For example, and these are usually the biotic type factors, so some kind of other organism is involved. So, for example, just diseases. If all the individuals in a population are all spread out, they don't encounter each other as often, there's not going to be as much spread of disease throughout that population. So that's a density dependent factor affecting the population. So if the population gets really dense, more individuals will spread disease to other ones, more individuals will die from that disease, and so the population will be affected by that. Predation. Sometimes the more individuals there are, the more that will attract predators that will then kill and eat a lot of the individuals. Whereas if there's not very many individuals, they're all spread out, fewer of them will be found and killed by predators. Parasitism, the same as diseases. The more dense the population is, the more the parasites will spread from individual to individual and kill some of them. Competition for resources, that's a big one. So the more individuals there are per acre, the more competition there is for the food or water or nesting sites or whatever in that area. Density independent factors. These are factors that will tend to limit a population size, but it doesn't depend on how dense the population is. And these are typically abiotic or non-living factors of the environment, like just natural disasters like fire, flood. So if there's a flood and it wipes out half of the individuals in a population. It doesn't matter if that population is very dense 20 individuals per acre or 1 individual per acre. Half of them are going to drown. So it's the population doesn't affect the population density does not affect how this factor limits the population. A forest fire. 90% of the squirrels are going to die in a forest fire. It doesn't matter how many squirrels there are per acre. They're just 90% of them are going to die. Habitat destruction, pollution, things like that. They're going to affect populations, but it's not really going to matter how dense the population is. So there's called density independent factors. So here's an example. Just a difference in mortality rates or death rates for wild donkeys in high density populations and low density populations. And the difference is supposedly because of competition for food. If there's in a low density population, there's not as much competition for food, so there's enough food for all of them. But as the population gets more dense, they're competing for food, and so they can't all survive. So there's higher mortality rate. Okay, these ecologists use these terms K-selected and R-selected species. And this is very similar to the type 1 and type 3 survivorship curves that we saw earlier. So a K-selected species is one that is adapted to a stable, predictable environment. Their populations tend to stay close to carrying capacity. They tend to have larger but fewer offspring. So that's like most large mammals, like humans. Have larger, they have fewer offspring, but they take good care of their offspring, and so there's a type 1 survivorship. So most individuals survive to old age, and then they die. For example, elephants. R-selected species adapted to unstable, unpredictable environments, and their strategy is they produce a lot of offspring, lay a lot of eggs, produce a lot of seeds, and most of them won't survive, but that's okay as long as a few of them survive each generation. That'll be enough to keep the species going. So marine invertebrates, like jellyfishes, plants such as most plants do this, produce a lot of seeds every year. Most of them won't survive or won't produce adult plants. Okay. So there's just two different strategies of keeping the species going. Okay. Again, like I was saying, the carrying capacity for humans on Earth is changing. The population grows, but technology increases carrying capacity in some ways. We learn how to grow more food, learn how to treat water, to purify water. We have water treatment plants. We have better medical treatments to keep us alive. And in some ways, technology helps preserve the environment, especially if we use technology the way we should, like for finding sustainable energy, like solar power and wind power and stuff, instead of using fossil fuels. But at the same time, technology is what causes us to become consumers of a lot of stuff. we all buy and use and throw away stuff uh, way too much, and so that stuff ends up in landfills and just we're just polluting the planet uh, because because we just use so much stuff as a result of technology. So technology can be good and bad for the environment and the carrying capacity. It depends on how we use it. So the population is now, it's getting close to 8 billion. And, but the UN, United Nations estimates could be anywhere from 6 billion to 16 billion by the year 2100. We don't know what's going to happen between now and then. Population might have to shrink, or it could keep growing if technology can keep up with it. So there's showing the population of the world from 1000, the year 1000 up to the present. So so far, this is exponential growth. It hasn't really leveled off yet. It hasn't become that S-shaped curve yet. But eventually it will. This showing the time between between the population increase of 1 billion. So back in 1800, it took this many years to add a billion to the population. In 1930, it took 130 years to add a billion. By 1960, it took 30 years to add a billion. So it's the rate of population increase has slowed a little bit in the past few decades, but it's still increasing, just at a slower rate. These age structure diagrams are a way of representing the how many individuals in different age groups are in a population. So this is age 15, and this is age 55, and males on the left, females on the right. So in this case, there's a lot of people, a lot more younger people than there are in the older age groups. These are sometimes referred to as age pyramids, or age structure pyramids, because many of them have that triangle or pyramid shape. So this is rapid growth. So a lot of younger people, these people, as they reach reproductive age, they're going to be making more. They're going to be reproducing. So this population is going to be growing fast. This one is still it's going to be increasing, but a little slower than this one. The sides of this diagram are more vertical. It's not as much of a. There's not as much. There's not a lot more young people compared to the older age groups. So this is a more stable population size. It's not growing rapidly. And this stage 4, it says a question mark, but this would actually probably be a shrinking population because there's less younger people. So in the future, these are going to be the reproductive ones, and there's less of them than there are now. So the number of reproducing individuals is shrinking. So this population is probably going to get smaller in the future. Okay, percent growth rate of population in different countries of the world, by different color. So these, I don't know what these colors are, but it's like yellow to me, or I don't know, yellow and tan or something. But these says less economically developed. So these are poor countries, less developed compared to Europe and North America, most of Asia and Australia. And you see the higher population growth is in the less developed countries, and there's typically a trend in the better technology, especially the better education of females. It means more opportunities for females to do something else with their lives except just being someone's husband and mother. So, when more opportunities for women are in a population, they tend to have less kids, and the population grows slowly. Of course, populations of different species affect each other. That's part of the study of ecology. We like to figure out if the size of a population of one animal increases, how does that affect the other animals or the other plants and so on. The term species diversity means the number of species in a community. How many different species there are. For diversity just means variety. How many different species there are. Tropical rainforests have the highest species diversity on land, and something like the glaciers in Antarctica, not very many different species. Hardly any plants. Probably no plants growing there. Few animal species. So low species diversity. In the oceans, the coral reefs have very high species diversity. Coral reefs are like the tropical rainforests of the ocean. So ecologists, go out into forests and count how many different species of trees there are, and figure out what's the species diversity. An example of the relationship between different species is predator-prey relationships. Certainly, the population of a prey species, like a rabbit, could be affected by a predator, like a bobcat or a lynx. And also, the predator's population is affected by the prey, because if there's not very many prey, the predator population can't grow very much. So this classic example of this is the lynx and hare populations. They were studied in Canada. This was based on 100 years of trapping data. The trapping data were used as a measure of the population sizes. So when the years that the trappers were more successful and got more hares, then that's an indication that the population was high, vice versa. But anyway, you can see the populations of the lynx and the hare, if you go up and down, up and down. This kind of fluctuation of increase and decrease of populations. This happens in just about every mammal species that's ever been studied. The populations, they don't stay the same. They go up and down over some cycle. Cycle could be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, depends on the species. But obviously here the population size of the lynx, which is this lighter color, it kind of follows the population fluctuation of the hare. When the population of one increases, so does the other one. When one decreases, so does the other one. And this is the explanation for this. As the hair numbers increase, there's more food for the lynx, so the lynx population will increase as a result. But the lynx population grows so large that they kill off so many hares that now the hare population drops. Then the lynx population is going to drop off too, because there's not as much food for the lynx. And so that's because of these cycles. Populations increase and then they crash, and then they increase and then they crash. Talking about predator and prey interactions, many prey species of animals and plants have their own defenses against predators. Mechanical defenses. Some animals have some type of armor. Armadillos, they have the hard plates covering their body. They can roll up into a ball, and they're pretty protected. Turtles have a shell they can stuff their arms and their legs and tail and head in. Pretty well protected. Arthropods. One of the reasons arthropods are so successful is they have a shell. And beetles. Beetles is a group of beetles is the largest order of animals of all. There's more beetle species than any other order of animals, and beetles are very successful because a beetle is the whole animal is covered with armor. You've got the head, thorax, and abdomen, and wings, but the whole thing is covered with armor. But the wings on a beetle, look at the back of a beetle. It's just like a big armored plate on there. That's actually the front wings of the beetle. Those front wings are not for flying; they're for armor. And the wings that it uses for flying are folded up underneath those wings. So, you ever watch a ladybug take off to fly? Ladybug it's just like this. And then to take off these front wings, they fold up, and then their flank wings unfold underneath that, and then they take off. They're cool to watch. But the whole thing is covered with armor, so pretty good defense. Probably why beetles are so successful. Chemical thorns in plants, thorns and spines. Some plants produce toxins or also. The chemical defenses. Plant compounds, toxic to animals, like nicotine and tobacco plants. That actually will kill an insect that tries to eat that plant. The oil on poison ivy causes a dermatitis if you get it on your skin. Of course, many animals produce toxins, poisons, venom. Physical defenses, blending in with the background so the predators don't even notice you. That's definitely an advantage. So walking sticks, chameleons that change color. There's some spiders that are called crab spiders that live on flowers, and they can change color to blend in. If they're on a yellow flower, the spider turns yellow. If it's on a white flower, the spider turns white. So they just blend in, and they wait for some insect to come and get nectar from the flower, and then they pounce on it and eat it. Warning coloration. Many animals that are bright colored, like especially frogs and salamanders and some insects that have bright colors. And those bright colors are to warn or to remind a predator that this is a toxic species. Honey locust is a tree that has these branching thorns for defense. This foxglove plant has a toxin in it that against herbivores that would eat it. This walking stick, it looks like a little branch of a tree. Predator might not even notice that. These chameleons can change color to match their background, to blend in. This is a toxic frog or toad. So if a predator would try to eat that and get a mouthful of toxin that's secreted on their skin, and a predator would to try to eat that one time, it would remember a bright coloration like that, and would probably avoid that species forever after that. So that's why it's believed that a lot of the toxic animals like this have these bright colors for warning to predators. And these bright colors and patterns of coloration are copied or mimicked by some species so that they look like a toxic or dangerous animal, but really they're harmless. So this is actually a fly that looks kind of like a wasp. So this is perfectly harmless, but a predator who would try to eat this and get stung would probably avoid something that looks like this, because it looks the same, pretty much. There's a lot of cases of this kind of mimicry in nature. Some of these butterflies, they all look pretty similar. In some cases, a harmless species will mimic a harmful, toxic species. In other cases, there will be two species that are both toxic or both harmful, and they look like each other. And that also will benefit both species, because if a predator tries to eat one and gets sick, then it would avoid the other species as well. So they help each other that way by looking like each other. This term niche, ecological niche, some people pronounce that niche. Ecological niche. That's just the role of a species in its environment. So everything it does, everything it needs. What kind of food it eats, how much water it needs, like what kind of soil it needs. If it's a plant, does it need a lot of sunlight or very little sunlight? What kind of place does it need for nesting, or does it burrow? Does it need to burrow in the ground? Just everything it needs and uses in its environment. It's called its niche. And there's an important, famous concept in ecology called the competitive exclusion principle. And according to this principle, it's impossible for two species that have the same ecological niche to coexist, to live in the same area. Because if they have exactly the same ecological niche, they both use exactly the same resources, one of them will always outcompete the other. So one will be excluded from that community. They'll either go extinct or have to move away, because the other one will be just better at competing for the resource. So this is kind of controversial. Not all ecologists argue about this. This is real or not, but it's a very well-known principle in ecology. um, well, this is just showing that these two species of paramecium, one-celled organisms, they do fine by themselves, either one by themselves with the population size over time. They do fine by themselves, and they're similar species. They use the same kind of resources, but if you put them together, one species does fine, it outcompetes the other one, and it disappears. So two species that have the same ecological niche, they either have to find a way to coexist, like to change. One of them will have to change its niche. Now there's been examples of a lot of different species of birds, very similar. They're called warblers, and they all eat the same thing. They like to live in this nest in the same kind of trees. But according to this principle, they can't live together. So what they have done is that they all nest in the same trees every year, but one species will only nest in the bottom part of the tree. Another species will only nest in the middle, and the other species will only nest at the top. And they do that all the time. So this way they have adjusted their niche just enough so that they can coexist. So their niches are not exactly the same anymore. They use the same tree for nesting, but one species uses the top of the tree, the other one uses the middle, and one uses the bottom. These symbiotic relationships. Symbiotic just means a close association or a close interaction between two things. Two things functioning together somehow. And in ecology, there's three types of this. Even predator-prey interactions are a type of symbiotic relationship, but these words, commensalism, mutualism, parasitism, these are types of symbiosis. So this is two species interacting in each of these cases. Commensalism just means that one species benefits from the interaction, and the other species doesn't benefit, but it's not harmed by this interaction. So a typical example used for the commensalism is birds nesting in trees. The birds benefit from having a place to nest, but the tree, it doesn't really hurt the tree to have a bird nesting in it, usually, but it doesn't help the tree either by having a bird nesting. And you might think it could if the birds are pooping, and that's fertilizer for the tree. But sometimes it's really hard to say if one of the species is really not harmed or helped by that association. Mutualism. Both species are benefited. Two species do something together, that they help each other. Either they live together, like lichens. We learned lichen. A lichen is a fungus and either an algae or a cyanobacteria living together as one organism, and they help each other. That's mutualism. But the classic example of mutualism is pollinating insects. Insects like bees or butterflies, they visit a flower to get nectar, so they're benefiting. But then if they do that, they get some pollen on their legs, and then they go visit another flower of the same species, and some of that pollen rubs off on another flower. So the flower species the plant species is benefiting. So that's a type of mutualism that that most species really need that. They can't survive without each other. Parasitism. One species benefits, but the other species is harmed. But unlike predation, unlike predator prey, the prey is killed right away usually. But in parasitism, it might kill the victim, called the host. The victim is called the host. The host might die from the parasite, but not right away. It'll take a while. Usually, the parasite is taking nutrients or energy away from the host, and so it might eventually kill it or just weaken it. So the commensal relationship, this bird nesting in that tree, it's probably not hurting that tree any. It's helping the bird. So that's probably commensalism. Some more examples of mutualism. Lichen, I already said that one. But termites, a mutualistic association. Termites cannot digest the wood that they eat. It's actually, they have protozoans that live in their digestive system that do the digesting for them. Without those protozoans, termites couldn't eat wood. So they both benefit. The protozoans that live in them, they have a place to live and they're getting fed all the time, but the termites need the protozoans to break down the cellulose in the wood that they eat so that they can get the nutrients from them. We have similar things. We have bacteria living in our intestines. That's a mutualistic relationship. We need them and they need us. Parasitism, lots of examples of this. So this is a tapeworm. Lives inside of people and other animals. The tapeworm benefits, but the host is harmed by it. Okay, you said that the term species diversity is just the number of species that live in a community. The word biodiversity, bio means life, diversity means variety. Biodiversity, just in general, it just means just the variety of life on Earth. How many species there are, and not only species, but how many families and orders and kingdoms there are on Earth. This term species richness is another measurable quantity. It's the number of species it's actually the number of species in a community. But the relative species abundance is the number of individuals of one species relative to all the others. So if there's in a forest, if there's 100 species of plants, that would be the species richness. But if 10% of those plants were longleaf pine trees, then that would be the relative species abundance of that particular species compared to the others. So these are things that ecologists like to study. If you go to a university and take a course in ecology, you'll probably do field trips and do projects like that, going out into forests, counting trees and different species, and then do some calculations, find out what's the dominant species, what's the relative abundance of the different species. So species richness, or the number of species in different places. Again, it's in the tropical areas where there's the most species. Tropical equatorial, so near the equators is where there's the most species. Longer growing season. Growing season is year round, and these the rainforests are very tall, so there's different layers in the rainforest, and like each layer or each height is a different community. There's some lot of insects in the tropical rainforest. They spend their whole lives up way up in the top of the canopies of the trees. So it's like there's a lot of different mini ecosystems within that one large ecosystem. So a lot of different species in the tropics. Some species are said to be a foundation species. That means they form the physical habitat for other species, like in a coral reef. The corals are little animals that actually produce those structures, those rocky corals that they live inside of. But that coral reef also produces or serves as habitat for many other animals that live in between the corals and among them. A lot of different fishes and worms and clams and octopuses and that live in those coral reefs. So the corals are the foundation species for that community. Trees are like this, of course. Trees provide habitats for many birds and insects and mammals. Giant seaweeds, these called kelp, they're called kelp forests. It's like an underwater forest that provides habitat for many marine organisms. The keystone species is one that's so important in an ecosystem that if it's removed, the populations of many other species would just collapse. They just can't. They depend on that other species for food or something. And this there's a coral reef, but this sea star is considered to be a keystone species. And this actually happened on the coast of California. This species was deliberately removed by some ecologists to see what would happen. And this species eats mussels, which are like clams. The mussel population increased so much that the mussel population increased at the expense, or so other species decreased. But, and so it changed the whole community, of that coastal community on in California, just by removing that one species. One species, another species got too big, another species shrank or disappeared for that. So it's considered a keystone species. And of course, the third one listed there is invasive species. So we all know about these. These are also called non-native species, sometimes called exotic species. But they become invasive when they become a pest. So species that's transplanted accidentally or sometimes on purpose from their natural native habitat into someplace else where they are so successful in their new homeland because there's no predators, no natural predators there. There's no diseases there, no parasites there. They're like they can reproduce, nothing to stop them. And so their populations just explode, outcompete native. Well, in some cases, they become predators on native species, so the native community suffers because of these invasive species. This is getting to be one of those, well, there's plenty of environmental problems, but this is getting to be a really serious environmental problem, this invasive species. Hard to say what's the worst environmental problem, but this, some people argue this could be the worst one, if it keeps going the way it is. Okay, well, we'll stop here. And got almost done with this chapter. We'll finish next time.